channel. So today's video is going to be a what I read in June video. Seems like the year has flown by, but once again I managed to complete 4 whole books in the month of June and start a 5th one. So I am going to go through them. As always, there's quite some variety to them, so let's jump in. So the first book I mentioned at the end of last month's video, so I'll leave it up in a card, but this is The Other Passenger by Louise Candlish, and this is about a guy who takes this riverboat taxi every day to work, and he, has got quite friendly with the guys at work, and one day one of the guys that he knows doesn't turn up. So the police come and talk to him about it, and it's all very mysterious about where this guy's gone. It goes from different perspectives to sort of present day and then leading up to this event, as a lot of these thriller books do. I did enjoy it. I can't remember what I said at the end of the last video. I think I was unsure as to whether I was going to give it 3 out of 4 stars. I think I did give it 4 stars purely because the ending had so many different twists to it. I thought it was really good, but as far as the whole book itself, I wasn't thrilled on the whole cheating aspect of it, and I don't see myself reading this book again, so I think that is to go on to my donate pile. The next book I read was The Village Green Bookshop by Rachel Lucas. Loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's about a woman called Hannah who has a husband and a son, and she is very sort of work focused. She doesn't really know what to do with her life now. Her son's sort of more of a teenager. He's getting into a lot of trouble, and she's sort of given this opportunity by her cousin to go and move from a busy bustling city of Manchester to then move to a very small rural town and take over from her cousin and run the village post office and set up partly in the post office little local shop, a bookshop. So this had all those very quaint small town feels. It was really nice. There is a bit of romance, but I wouldn't say it's heavy in it. It just felt really nice. There is obviously the guy, the sort of love interest, is an ex-footballer, and so we get the 2 perspectives from him, called Ben, and we get Hannah, who's moved to the town. So we see those different lives, and then obviously at some point in the book they start to intermingle. Just really, really nice. Definitely a nice summer read. If you like anything set in small English little towns, this is right up your street. So yeah, I enjoyed reading that. The next book I read was called The Therapist by B.A. Paris. This is a chunky book, and again I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. It was really, really good. So I think I wrote some notes on it, but it's about a couple that move into this sort of highbrow secured little housing area, I'd say. I imagine it sort of, there is a garden square in the middle and all the nice sort of London houses circulate it, but they're in a gated community. So the main woman in this book is called Alice. So her and her partner Leo, they move in to this house together, and secrets start to unravel about this woman called Nina, who is the therapist, who lived in the house before them, and she was actually murdered in that house. We find that on pretty quickly, and it just sort of unravels from there. The main character Alice, she has her own sort of dark past. We know very early on that she pretty much is the only member of her family left. They died for a while. We don't know how they died, and that sort of is a story that lingers through. But this book is sort of a lot of it dealing with Alice coming to terms with living in this house. Now she knows about the murder, trying to make friends with her neighbours and try and find out more about this woman called Nina. She sort of has a tie to want to know more about this woman, and yeah, just some amazing twists and turns in this. Alice starts to think that maybe someone's sneaking in at night, and it's not her partner, and yeah, it just becomes quite unsettling you just feel that sort of edge of your seat, you know something's not gonna end well, just really unsettling feeling, and I really enjoyed that about this book. There was things that I didn't see coming at all. It looks like she has a couple more books, I'm saying she, it could be he, one called The Dilemma and one called Bring Me Back. So I might look into those because I enjoyed the writing of this book. So the next book I read was The Governor by Vanessa Frake, and she was a governor of security and operations at HMP Wormwood Scrubs, which is a big prison facility in or around London. And she has worked in prisons for about 16 years. She started off in a women's prison in HMP Holloway, which, if you don't know, it stands for Her Majesty's Prison. Yeah, I think that's it. So she started off in a women's prison, sort of worked her way through there, and then transferred to HMP Wormwood Scrubs, and worked her way up through security there and became, you know, one of the top guys of security. And so it's all about her being in what's predominantly a man's world. When you think of prison officers, most of the time you think of either like really burly women, but most of the time you do think of men. It can be, you know, it is a very scary place. It's very stressful. It can be very emotionally draining as well as physically draining. So it's all about her on the back saying being thrust into a man's world, as she puts it. She talks about, you know, obviously some of the people she comes in contact with, some of the celebrities, how she tried to, you know, really turn the prison around. She did come out of the prison service, I want to say, a couple of years ago. She did give it up, and she's now working, I believe, somewhere in Essex as a, like a baker, or, primarily a baker, I would say, but helping out in like a cafe kitchen, that type of thing. So really a change of job for her, but it, you know, it goes back to the 80s and leads up from there, in sort of her 20 years of work being in a prison. So it has some hard things to read at some point. There was a really funny bit about how some of the prisoners were allowed to keep budgies, and there was this one guy that was going out, I guess for like a family meeting, and he asked her to look after her budgie, and while the budgie was sat on her shoulder, she ended up walking into like one of the main governors of the prison. So that was quite funny. But then there also is a dark side regarding obviously the stories and the cases of these people and what they did. Some of that is obviously hard to read, which, I mean, don't read this if this is, I mean, it's not totally gruesome, don't read it at all, because otherwise I wouldn't be reading it. But, you know, some things were hard to read. For example, one inmate did kill his budgie, and that was really hard to read, especially as an animal lover. So just go into it with a little bit of caution, and just know that. But on the whole, it's not too distressing, I would say, which is good. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So those were the 4 books that I finished. So 3 out of 4 were really good, and then one was a 4-star anyway, like a 3.5, 4-star. So I would say that wasn't bad going for the month of June. The book I'm reading at the moment, and I'm about just over halfway through, is The Man Who Broke into Auschwitz by Dennis Avey. This is written by a British prisoner of war who went off to war in Africa to fight the Italians during the war, and then sort of made his escape, really, from war, was sort of given a lifeline of being able to stay with a family and a girl in South Africa. And, you know, his conscience sort of hit him, and he went to go back into the army and was obviously captured by the Germans and taken into many different camps, and he ends up for, you know, most of this book that we read, being in Auschwitz-Monowitz, which is the 3rd camp. That is where they have the big factory that they made the synthetic rubber. Is it IG Farben? I think that might be in the company. But anyway, it talks about his time you know, his time in the army, fighting the Italians in Africa and then being captured, what it was like for him being a prisoner of war, and then his experience with not just once but twice swapping places very briefly with a Jewish inmate that he came across. And so far, it's weird to say, I am really enjoying this book. It's interesting for me to read about a British prisoner of war because I've not really read anything about prisoner of wars before. So it's interesting to see how they were treated. Yes, they were treated badly, but not, obviously not nearly as bad as like the Jewish people and the gypsies, and that's all like the rest of the people that were persecuted. And for him, I thought he was a really amazing guy because he knew something like big was going on here, and he didn't know at the end of it how many of these people, the Jewish people, the gypsies, the homosexuals, how many of them were going to be left to be able to tell their own story. And that, I believe, was the motivation for him to want to swap places with a Jewish campmate. He wanted to be able to not only be like have the hearsay, he wanted to be able to see what was going on, experience what was going on, so he could then go back and be able to tell their story if they weren't able to, which, as we know, millions of people didn't and weren't able to. So I found it really powerful that he wanted to go in and do that and fend for it himself. Obviously you could say, well, he only was there for, you know, 2 separate times for 24 hours at a time. He didn't really get the true experience. Obviously, whilst he was there, he felt the fear, because if him or the other guy were found out, that would have been the end of both of them. At any point, any SS soldier could have, you know, ended his life. He knew that. But he still knew that if he could make it to those 24 hours, he would be able to swap back and have the safety of being a British prisoner and having his British uniform back. Whereas thousands and thousands of people, if they got to the end of their 24 hours, well, that was just another 24 hours they'd done. They wouldn't know if they were going to survive the next 24 hours. Whereas Dennis Avey knew that even though every day he was working at the factory alongside all of these prisoners, he knew, and the rest of his soldiers knew, that at the end of the day they're going back to an okay meal and an okay bed, whereas the prisoners were going back to barely substantial food and barely a bed, if you get what I'm saying. So I can expect this to be, I would say, a 4-star book. I think we're coming to the end of it, of his time being a prisoner. He has just been sort of liberated, so it'll be interesting to see what the rest, like the other quarter of the book or the last third, is about. So yeah, I will talk again about this again in my next video where I recap what I read this month, but yeah, I can predict that's going to be sort of a 4-star book. So that was all that I read in the month of June. Let me know if you plan to add any of these to your to be read list, and if you've got any recommendations, anything you think I might like, make sure you leave a comment down below. As always, my Goodreads is always in the description box as well, so if you want to see what book I'm on as I'm reading it, that is the place to go. And also, don't forget to subscribe so then you don't miss any future book reviews and these monthly read videos. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.